All right, Craig Martelle coming to you live from the subarctic. Now that we're live, I always squeeze that in before we go live. Anyway, coming to you live from the subarctic where it's dark and it will continue to be dark until it gets dark tonight. We have today, we're talking about covers. We're talking about trends. We're talking about what's hitting right now, general design elements based on different genres. And we brought the experts in. We have Ryan Schwarz, Mariah Sinclair, and Sylvia Frost. Where are you coming to us from, Mariah?
I am in Prescott, Arizona. Small town about 90 miles from Flagstaff, Sedona, or Phoenix, depending which way you drive.
Yep. And Sylvia?
I'm in Chicago, a small town about 4 hours by plane from New York City or Los Angeles.
What about you, Ryan? You're in the middle of nowhere.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in Tulsa, and just north of Tulsa, Oklahoma, where it's a beautiful, balmy 70 degrees today. So I'll take that.
Man, look at that! It is 25 degrees here. Yesterday, it got above freezing for about 20 minutes, but generally we're at that time of year. So, Mariah, what is your specialty as far as genres?
I'm known mostly for cozies. And then I also work in other mystery realms, but I'm really known for cozies.
And I'll follow up on that. What, like, the difference between cozy and other mysteries? I know it's rather significant. Sylvia.
I am the lady of the romance, although again, I've literally done everything. Lately, actually, I've been doing a lot of women's fiction too, just because I think that's where I see a lot of authors trending, and we can talk about that later.
Women's fiction, that's also called like chick lit or women's lit, or
so it was sort of chick lit more in like I think a while ago. Now it's really more about like it's lots of divorced women going on vacation.
No, yeah, that's interesting. Ryan, what do you do, man?
I do a little bit of the other stuff. So a lot of thrillers, a ton of sci-fi, a ton of post-apoc, and some mystery, and a lot of fantasy as well.
I think I actually have 35 covers that Ryan has done for me or something like that. It's kind of obtuse. And Ryan actually named a room in his house after me.
Yeah, this is the Martelle lab up here. So, yeah. Yeah. I wore my arm out working for you.
That's right. That's right. How's that shoulder healing, man?
It's slowly.
Too much baseball when you're younger. That's what it's all about.
True story right there.
What's Sylvia, in romance, the biggest genre, the biggest readership? What are you seeing as the main trends by the primary subgenres, like sweet, steamy?
Yeah,
Western?
That's a really great question, Craig. So what I'm seeing now actually is a trend. It's not so much a trend as it is something that's been shaped by Amazon's decision. So it used to be that, especially for steamy, and even sometimes for books that weren't super steamy, everyone would come to me and say, I want the hot, sexy guy with six-pack visible. I'm seeing a lot more authors now being like, we're considering having that covered, even because of Amazon ads and being cognizant of trying to make sure that their covers are marketable through Amazon ads. So that's something that I'm seeing, which I think will be curious to see how that continues to play out. Because right now I'd say it used to be like I really did mostly steamy, like almost all. I didn't do any sweet romance. Now I'd say it's about 25 sweet, 75 still steamy. And I'll be very curious to see how that trend continues to change. I mean, steamy is still, and the six-pack is still king. The hot, sexy guy or the hot, sexy couple. I think couples are actually much more likely to flag Amazon's algorithm. So actually, I think the single sexy dude is still a little safer than the sexy couple. But yeah, most people are advertising now. So the cover is really, it still is thumbnail first for sure, but I'd say coming up on its heels is ads second as sort of the driving design concern.
I've seen like Pamela Kelly is at the forefront of her genre, kind of literary fiction, mystery, but romance. So it might fall under a mystery romance or women's fiction. And she has eschewed putting any characters on the front of her books.
Yep. That's certainly a trend, I think, for women's fiction is mostly where I've seen this happen. I think romance, so I've done a number of Facebook tests with some of my authors. I've worked with them through the ad process at a higher price point, obviously, where I'll design multiple covers and then they'll run them through ads and then whatever wins. And in general, for romance that isn't women's fiction, I found people are still king by a country mile, even in my mind when the cover has been stronger. But I think that is different now for women's fiction. But I would say if you are classifying your book as romance first, I still think people are the way to go. But that could be changing. Most of the Facebook ad tests I did were last year. So the stuff changes in a second.
And Mariah, on differences between cozy and mystery.
So, cozy generally has a cuteness factor to it, a cozy factor. You kind of get that squee kind of feeling when you look at it, where mystery you won't. And mystery generally just has an ominous approach. You won't find that same kind of ominous factor on a cover that's for a cozy. That's probably the biggest, quickest way to tell the difference is the lack of ominous.
And Cozy titles, Murders and Mayhem, Cupcakes,
yeah,
and
so your
Cannibals.
title is probably more important than the actual design with cozies. And this is one of the only genres I will say this about. So don't take this little note and think you can apply this to every genre, because this is very cozy specific. The title is your main leverage. And so you need to make sure that title's readable. And that's where I see a lot of cozy authors that make their own covers fail, is they're not making the title readable. And that's the big hook. It's generally a pun or alliteration, but cozy readers love figuring stuff out. That's the whole point of a mystery book, is figuring out the puzzle. So if your title hints to that, a pun is a puzzle. It's a very small little puzzle. But if alliteration, puns, that really speaks to the cozy reader and gets them excited. So the better your pun, the better it hooks in cozy readers of oh, this is my book.
Yeah, you tell me who wouldn't pick up Cupcakes and Cannibals. That speaks to it, especially a cutesy little picture with the front of a sweets shop.
Right. I got into cozy because of the pun titles. I didn't even know what a cozy mystery was, but I saw the book Live and Let Chai. And I'm like, what is that? That's crazy. I love puns. So I got drawn in by the pun and I'm like, what is this book? I never knew of this as a genre. So it was a pun that hooked me in and continues to pay very well. My love of puns has served me well in this industry.
And here you see it. The cover artists who are at the front of their trade also read those genres, so they know this isn't something hey, I'm going to put together great artwork. And I will tell you from experience, great artwork does not necessarily make for great covers. You have to speak to the reader. This is an advertisement. Mariah was saying, this pun, Live and Let Chai. Oh, hey, that's cool. And they dive in. What does that cover look like? Oh, it's probably changed a couple times since then. And it's that first look that gets them to then click the blurb, and the blurb will sell the book. Mm-hmm. The blurb, look inside, that sells your book. So please, everybody out there, authors, the artists, trust their eye in something, and don't take a Botticelli painting and all of a sudden, hey, this is going to be a great cover. The artwork, you can zoom in. If you have to zoom in, you've already lost it. and that's one thing. You go big, you go a gregarious, my thrillers. I paid a fair deal for these thriller covers and the whole package, and 90% of it is my name and the name of the book. But that's the thrillers, and then a shadow with a background of the city of my choice. And so that was and they are optimal because it's not just, hey, let's just make the name of the book real, in one word, the operator, because thrillers, once again, you got to keep them clean. But the color palettes that were used, you can't just throw big text on the screen and declare victory. It's the text, but it matches perfectly. So as you shrink it down and down and down, you see it with 5 other covers on a phone screen, you can still read my cover. And you can still see the colors, and it speaks to you as, hey, this is the genre. So these are what your designers, your cover designers get right. Don't just say, hey, big text, big name, because that's in thrillers. Yes, but all kinds of that stuff. Ryan, what are you seeing in sci-fi?
You know, it's funny, sci-fi and post-apoc and fantasy, those genres follow pop culture a lot. So kind of the stuff you see on Netflix, you kind of start seeing show up a couple months later. You know, I look at, and I went and did a search before we jumped on here, and I got it on my other screen over here and I always do this. Anytime an author reaches out to me and says, hey, I'd like to work with you, and here's my cover I have now, or here's what I'm thinking, and I have this big scene I want you to do, I say, well, let's go look at what's selling now, right? And you just do a Google search, top selling covers on Amazon or top selling books on Amazon in military science fiction, for example. And I go in there, and it reminds me, if I go in there and look, of kind of this mixture of almost dystopian sort of military sci-fi. Kind of feels like The 100 on Netflix. And, these things follow pop culture. I can do the same thing with post-apoc. I can go in there, and you remember back in the day when The Walking Dead was the biggest thing ever? I can't find a cover in the top 50 that has a zombie on it anymore in post-apoc, because that trend has moved on, right? Now it's really more that last kind of feeling that you get in some of those things like The Colony, and different shows that you see. So, more than anything, sci-fi and post-apoc are going to follow pop culture. Fantasy is going to is a little bit of the same, but some of these big authors push the genre themselves. You think of like a George R.R. Martin, when he releases a book, all of a sudden within a year, Grimdark's really big, right? Like everybody's pushing the.
Yeah, but we don't have to worry about that except once every 10 years.
Remember.
Nice example, Ryan.
Thank you. I think what you're going to see here coming up is like Dune. Dune coming up. And those kinds of books that do really well. So the hardest thing in researching these genres, not to get off topic, is trying to ignore the giant trad releases like Harry Potter and Jim Butcher. Those guys are awesome, and they can push a genre a little bit. But when I ask somebody to show me the covers they like, and I get a Harry Potter cover, a Jim Butcher cover, Brandon Sanderson, and then another Jim Butcher, I'm like, okay, like let's go to free covers now, and they're free books. Yeah, you can't pick those.
And that's whenever I've got a new series of covers with Ryan, the first thing he did was he pulled the top 50 covers in that and shrunk them down so they fit on one thing and sent them to me in Slack. And I look at them and you could clearly see the color trends. Post-apoc, space opera, it's got that bluish screen. Post-apoc is that tan or amber. And we get it. We get that thing. Somebody asked a question. How do you approach blended genres? And this is Ryan did a great job for me with my supposed cozy that really wasn't cozy when we recovered them to mystery, and he went with a blue palette that then also like screamed severe mystery, like Monster Case Files, but it's YA. It's twins that search out and pull the mask off the guy who's acting the monster. I mean, kind of Scooby-Doo-ish. Even though they're more adult, and the new covers they have rocked. I tell you, we've sold 10 times the number of books with the new covers than we did with the old ones. So that resonated well, but it was a mashup because Ryan could not figure out, because I couldn't tell him exactly. Here's the exact genre. Make it look like these. So
yeah. I love that redo. I told Ryan when those first came out that I loved that makeover. I thought it really spoke to what you were trying to convey with the stories. Yeah. And it was amazing. It was an amazing redo. I really loved it. I don't know where your question was on that, though. I just wanted to say that.
Sylvia.
The blended.
Yeah, blended genres, I think.
I think you need to look at, first question, which audience is going to be most satisfied with the story? You want to attract them. Yep. You have your two components, imagery and typography, right? And that's a great way of blending, is maybe take imagery from one and then look at the typography of the other genre and see if that works with that imagery. I mean, part of it's experimenting. Like if you're blending genres, you're going to have to start kind of being open to some experimentation. But that's how I've approached it, is looking at imagery with one genre and seeing if the typography, if like sci-fi typography works with this, and see if that can convey both genres. But the primary focus is look at your audience that's going to be satisfied by this and attract them. So, it may be ignoring your second blended genre. If, as far as aesthetically on the cover, if it doesn't work, go for your primary audience that's going to be satisfied with the story.
And that's one thing I tell everybody. Genre equals marketing. So this is find the biggest genre where you're going to find the most readers who are going to like your book. So this is something people want to sub it and get so detailed on their cover. It's like, stop. This is just marketing. Don't get lost in your own story. So sometimes authors are their own worst enemies when it comes to giving cover designers direction. What were you saying, Ryan? I'm sorry.
Well, a couple of things within what Mariah was saying and then what you said too. From a blended genre standpoint, you got to look at what's going to be your most bang for your buck. What are you going to get the best out of? You can give odes to the other genre, through the use of photography, through color, through the way that the figures are posed, the background, the scene, those things you can give. Just a little bit of a hint towards that secondary blend, but you want to primarily hammer the genre that's going to get you the most exposure and the readership that you're looking for. As it relates to an author saying, well, I am this subgenre and I want this with, these little elements all over it. And, what I tell people is say, look, a book cover is not for you. And this is I'm fairly blunt, so it's hard for me to tone down, but I'm like, this is not a cover for you. This is a cover for the people that will buy it from you. If you want me to make you a poster, I will be happy to make you a poster. It's twice the price of my book. I was like, because you're going to be difficult to work with. And
you say that? You don't say that.
I say it'll be more difficult for me. It'll be more difficult for me because it'll be specific to what you want, the scene in your book. I will make you a poster. I will make you a landscape, but it will not be your cover. It'll be something for you to put on your wall and look at your ego. And that's okay. And if that you want, I've had people that do that, and it's okay to do that because some people want that pride poster up there. Yeah, I did this. And that's, it's a great feeling to finish a book. It's amazing.
Yeah. I think a lot of time people mix up goals, especially beginning authors. Is the goal for you to feel like you have published a book the way you always dreamed you would publish the book, or is the goal for you to sell it? And I honestly advise people that if your goal is to publish a book the way you've always dreamed it, you certainly can self-publish, but I think honestly, a lot of times, especially the people who have that as their goal, what they really want is to feel a certain way when they look at the cover. And so they're like, well, I saw a deer once when I was writing this book, so I really need to have a deer on this cover because it signifies the emotional attachment I have. And I say, that's not, we're not really about, we're interested in making the reader feel emotionally attached to the book. You already have an emotionally attachment to the book. We don't need to convince you to love your book, I hope. If we do, there's a bigger problem.
That's not. And Sylvia, on romance, when people want to mash up, because I actually wrote a romance short story for one of my anthologies that it got rejected because
your own anthology.
So yeah, my own anthology.
You got the power. You can
that's when you empower people, they take the power, and I got rejected from my own anthology. But I took this and I gave it to my readers. And when I did the cover, I of course, I went to deposit photos and I did the ubiquitous search that I recommend people don't use, which is Man from Behind Seattle. So don't use that search because you're going to get some really weird shit.
Oh my gosh.
So I got and then couple from behind, and yeah, that's equally bad. but they did have some photos, so I got one and I gave it to an artist, and I said, hey, use my normal font, my science fiction fonts, and he did it, and he said, you don't want this. Here, use this. And I looked at it, I'm like, oh man, that's so foofy, and I'm like, okay, whatever, man. And that's what I ended up using, what he recommended. Because the sci-fi font on this it had flowers and a couple walking hand in hand, and yeah, it didn't work. So I went with the foofy.
Yeah, it's romance is really interesting that way, in that I actually find that a masculine vibe can actually sometimes really sell a romance book if it is you have a really sexy dude on the cover who is looking very masculine but is shirtless and is sexy. And like I oftentimes, especially for PNR, paranormal romance, I won't use, and that has its own font language. But you know, for romance, I think that if the image is doing the work that it should, which is signaling this is something that is enticing, most often to female readers. For steamy romance, then I've seen fonts actually will often signify whatever the secondary genre is. So if it's thriller, you'll have the thriller font with the sexy couple. If it's paranormal romance, you'll have the Sinclair, the like swoopy font with like the little tiny pointy edges. And so, you know, I think that usually the hard work of a romance cover is done in like most covers, is done in the image. And then because almost every romance novel is in some sense a genre mashup, with probably the exception of contemporary. But even then, usually like there's an office setting, or there's, you know, billionaire or whatever. And so usually with romance, you have to signal this is a romantic fantasy, and because the genre's just so huge otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had a great conversation before we went live about nipples and on covers, and this is an important safety tip. It's not just, we're not talking about nipples just to talk about nipples. It's about the cover and the presentation. And I had brought up one of my series that we did. We changed up the individual on the cover from a mom bod middle-aged woman to a 20-something, and Ryan put some age cracks around her eyes, and that was the compromise to make her look a little older, but still, it was the compromise. And like anime, you see a lot where they highlight the nipples underneath a skin bodysuit or something like that. What as artists, what do you recommend the authors go with when it comes to that kind of thing? Does it help or hurt?
It's not what the author wants. It's if the genre shows nipples all over the place, then, you know, go with the research. Go with what the genre is telling you is selling. You know, if there's now a new genre where a third nipple on the forehead is what's doing it, then guess what? You're getting a third nipple on the forehead. I mean, I when I design covers, it's almost like I spend about half again as much time researching genre as I do designing the cover to make sure that it's hitting trends and, you know, and seasonality of trends. And a lot of times I have people that are coming out with covers that are about to hit like trad season, like right before all those releases come out in the fall. And I'll be like, let's wait until those things hit and see what happens. And then let's move your date out to December so we can really see what's coming out, because they're not going to release till May anyway. Right. Or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you have to go with what the genre tells you is happening.
Yeah, and Sylvia was talking earlier about Amazon ads. What will get you blocked?
Yeah. So there's actually, first of all, I just see Facebook user in my sidebar, so I'm sure you have a name, but thank you, Facebook user. Thank you, Facebook user. This feels very dystopian. For complimenting my work. And you asked, are romance covers moving away from man chest? And I think this segues perfectly into Craig's question about nipples, which is a topic I think about a lot. And so Amazon ads, in relationship to Amazon ads, which are, they are like Facebook ads, like every ads, there are people who will flag stuff if it seems too suggestive. So even if your book is steamy, sometimes having a book cover that looks too suggestive can make it impossible to advertise, which in the book market that we're in now is basically means your book can feel dead in the water, because most people I know now advertise. So what I would say is what I see getting flagged the most actually aren't necessarily even Manchester, although Manchester will get you flagged, I think, on Amazon, but is couples in like couples that are too sexy. That is actually just as dangerous as Manchester, especially in Facebook, I think. So what I would say is that I think at this point, with most authors I've seen, the scale has not yet tipped to be that Manchester is it's better to put a shirt on if your book is steamy. I think it is still, the shirtless guy is still reigning king, which you'll see if you look on the Amazon top 50 in paranormal romance or anywhere else. But I'll be curious to see what happens. I think obviously if you're writing sort of more, if your book isn't super steamy, if steam isn't the selling point, I think having a guy with a shirt is not the worst idea anymore. Whereas I feel like 4 years ago, I would have told you lean more towards having a guy with a shirt. But I think that has changed. Not for sweet romance, but for even if like your book was just general romance and it wasn't super steamy, I might say, like let's play up the steam aspect. But I think now the censors have really cracked down. So certainly putting a shirt on a guy, or even having a couple that isn't necessarily taking all of each other's clothes off, but just in a slight embrace is good. So yeah, I think that is one thing. I will say though that people still reign supreme. I've had some people come to me in paranormal romance and steamy genres for women's fiction, which is different from romance. It's a different story. But for books that are romance, I've done some, like last year I did some Facebook testing, and the people cover just blew the object-based cover out of the water. So I think like a guy half clothed is probably the best thing. Like a guy with a shirt, but it's open slightly is sort of the way, if that's the ideal right now, I'd say.
Okay. Yeah. I've seen that with the billionaire romance, but it's a tuxedo that's open.
Yes.
And something like that. And just the guy. And then of course the billionaire being a special font and whatever the catchy other title is. And so an important safety tip for those people watching the show, do not search on deposit photos shirtless man from behind Seattle. Don't search that. You'll be better off for it. So anyway, just for amateurs like me,
Seattle's a dangerous place, man.
Take care with your search terms on deposit photos. For Mariah, what are you seeing for 2021 moving forward with cozy covers? More of the same?
So recently, maybe about 2 years ago, the aesthetic for paranormal cozy and cozy kind of separated a little bit. And paranormal started integrating more people, like photo manips in them. And so that trend is continuing. So they're kind of doing these more lighthearted urban fantasy almost with women on them, teenagers, sparkles. And then anything featuring a pet, whether it's paranormal or traditional cozy, has moved more to photo-based and photo manipulation. So that trend seems to be continuing. Vectors still work for everything else, though. So, and then vectors will still carry you well with witch cozies when you're doing the silhouettes. So that's a very popular way of conveying a paranormal cozy witch is with the black silhouette. Personally, that's the only time I really use the color black is when I'm doing a paranormal cozy. I do not use black very often on traditional cozies. So watch your color palettes. If you are working with a paranormal story, paranormal cozy, you can go to those richer hues of the jewel tones and then combine it with black. If it's a traditional one, I would not use a lot of black on it, because then you're starting to move into what we started at the beginning of this conversation was what's the difference between cozy and straight mystery, just a regular traditional mystery or thriller even, is color palettes. So if you're doing a traditional cozy, watch your color palette. Don't go too dark.
You want pastel kind of?
Pastel or just bright, like lively colors,
Okay.
happy colors. Happy colors. So even your bright blue, your bright red, your bright yellow, or pastels if you want to go pastels. Especially,
I'm happy that I knew the word pastel, but I actually don't know what it relates to. But I thought anyway. Yeah, I should have just waited for you to finish and then just repeated back what you said, and then I sound smart. That's a business consultant. 7 years working for Fortune 100 companies, and that was the best way to sound smart. Just listen to the smartest guy in the room and repeat what he said. And then everybody, oh man, he gets it. Yeah, no kidding.
I just saw a comment.
So does the parrot.
I just want to quickly address the comment about cozies real quick. That is a huge difference between cozies and other genres of books or other mysteries is the cute factor. Like if your cover goes, oh, that's cute, you've probably nailed it. That and just make sure that title is super readable, big. My titles take up 2/3 of my covers on cozies a lot of the time. So 1/2 to 2/3. Focus in on that title.
And I feel like almost, sorry.
Yeah, Sylvia, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I feel like every cover has an, oh, that's blank. So like for cozy, oh, that's cute. Romance, oh, that's sexy for steamy, or for like sweet, that's like not cute, but like not all
sweet,
cute, but like sweet. Yeah, that's sweet. Or for sci-fi, oh, that's badass. Or for fantasy, oh, that's epic. So I think that's a great test to look at your cover and ask some friends and say, do they say, oh, that's cute? And sometimes even if you've like done all the right things, but they're not saying that, it means that you need to switch something up. And I see this is a lot what I think about for romance. I think about like, what is the fantasy? And does the cover, and is it cover selling whatever that escape is? Because indie publishing is really, I think, mostly about escape.
So I'm going to address a comment here from a Facebook user. My husband wrote a meat buying guide, but didn't want it to look like a recipe book. Sorry, I just had to. I giggled because it was so random, but it's a good question. Would it be good to use people on the cover like a butcher? So I'm going to go back to what we kind of all mentioned earlier. I don't know. I don't know if it'd be good to use a butcher. I would have to go do research on it for you to let you know. And I think that
despite what you're thinking, do not use the search term man
with meat.
Looking for meat in Seattle.
In Seattle.
Don't do that. But it's interesting because that's one of those. It's a different genre, but that would fall into nonfiction. And so, you've done some nonfiction for me. And before we get into that, let's talk about paranormal romance, which I pronounce peener. So, in paranormal romance, what are the trends? Because that's adjusting and shifting a little bit, I believe.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really, for me, paranormal romance is the genre I started writing. It's probably the genre that I do the most work in. And I've seen it really depends for me now on the author. Like in terms of the trends of most paranormal authors I work with now are pretty established. So I found that it's been more for me about helping shepherding their brand and their place in the marketplace. For people that are just launching, I'd say, glowy. I feel like urban fantasy and paranormal romance have really kind of dovetailed together. I feel like urban fantasy has actually sort of invaded a lot of genres and sort of style. And so I think certainly like glowy, flowing hair. I mean, reverse harem is obviously huge in terms of the romance genre, but it's almost its own separate thing. But yeah, I'd say making sure that your silhouette is visible at thumbnail for whatever character it is and however glowy that is, but not too exposed, I think is sort of the crux of the dilemma now. I'll see a lot of covers that are they're overexposed in the goal of being glowy. And just make sure that whatever model that you have on there looks really appealing. That is the number one thing. And that usually means not whatever effects you're putting on the cover, don't put so much that you make the model look like distorted or odd because of the lighting or
obscured. Like
it's interesting. What I've seen from reverse harem is it's not like harem where it's a dude and a bunch of sexy women around him, but reverse harem is a little bit different on the covers. What's that about?
So reverse harem, for anyone who doesn't know, is sort of what it sounds like. It's a girl with many guys. And oftentimes, because fitting 7 guys or 5 guys on a cover can prove visually difficult, people will just do a single woman, usually in a flowing dress, looking very regal and powerful and sexy. So that is something. Sometimes for reverse harem, I will do the guys in the background as well, usually smaller. Like, I think if you ever seen like a CW poster for like Gossip Girl or something, where there's a bunch of really attractive people sort of lounging around together, I feel like sometimes reverse harem covers can have that vibe, obviously with the people being just one very beautiful woman and a lot of other very beautiful men. But yeah, so I would say that trend is certainly happening. And I think, I haven't seen it super slowing down.
Okay. That was my next question. Is it still cranking? Because I know people, there's that fear of writing to trend as opposed to writing to market. And I think reverse harem has established itself as a market more so than a trend. Initially, it might have been a trend, and those who were first into it really cleaned up and did great.
Yeah.
And then maintaining that audience and maintaining that dopamine hit for your readers. Right. So that's good. And talking about rushes and dopamine hits and excitement, let's talk about nonfiction. And Ryan did my most recent nonfiction, Leader Within. It's a completely different vibe, especially you see my successful indie author. I went with yellow, black, and text and then a cute little image because I wanted it to stand out but look kind of like the same. And with the Leader Within, it's different. It's not a book of that series. It's a separate, just straight leadership title. And Ryan did his usual thing. He went and researched and said, "Hey, here's all the leader. This is really what you're looking at." So one take, and here we go. Bob's your uncle. I got a cover. Nonfiction. What are you seeing for the main nonfic trends?
Yeah, it's amazingly stable. Nonfiction is a very stable genre, and it is more than any other genre, flavor of the month. The newest books that come out that get hot fast go, and they stay hot, and then they drop. Except for the ones like, that are traditionally, the Tony Robbins books and those things. You get those giant authors in there, and their books will always do well. But you'll have the kind of like diets, kind of like the diet of the month. It's in nonfiction, you get these books that flash up and then they flash out. But the way the genre looks is pretty stable. And you have to touch on the subgenre you're talking about. So you can make a nonfiction book it's got to be text heavy. It's got to really pop in terms. You got to be able to read it from a distance, right, and see what it says. But it also has to have imagery that conveys. I think of the question we had a minute ago with the meat market or how to buy meat. We can definitely do something text heavy with a giant steak on there or something, whatever the genre tells us. But it has to feel nonfiction, not fiction. And it has to feel like it's conveying something within that. And the biggest thing to make sure people really stand out is snappy titles help so much. You know what I mean? And where you have puns in cozies, you have things that make you either think or make you wonder. I think of like Seth Rogen's really good at this. One of the first books I read of his is, and he's a kind of like a business guy, but it's called The Purple Cow. And the book was nothing but a giant word that said the purple cow and then a purple background with white cow spots on it, right? And you're like, what is the purple cow? And you go look in there, and it's about being different. It's about if you saw a field of cows and you saw a purple cow, it would stand out. How are you going to be a purple cow? That's kind of the concept of the book. How do you stand out in a group of salespeople? But you have to figure those things out for when you're looking at the genre and the research, because there's those
before going to your cover artist. I think of the top selling titles: 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Highly effective. You look at the charged words, and that one is a perennial top 100 Amazon seller. You have The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F * CK. You've got, and these books are always up there, and you wonder, how is that? It's that catch. Everything I Know About Women. I know that title rocked a couple years ago, and all it was a blank book. And just because of the catchy title, and also it was trad published, so it was in bookstores. So it hit Amazon top 10 and New York Times, and it was a blank book. cover sold and the premise. So this is something you need to think about when choosing your title. My very first book that I ever wrote was called It's Not Enough to Just Exist. Okay, it resonated really well with girls aged 13 to 17. However, it was a post-apocalyptic survival book. So anyway, that title then became End Times Alaska and published by an imprint of Simon & Schuster. Once they said, "What the hell are you doing?" I was left unsupervised. Was my answer, and so you have to do your research. Anytime I have a new book, and I have a lot of new books all the time, right? I'll search that on Amazon. Just check the title. What do you get when you check this title? And I did one title, a military sci-fi, domination. Well, when you search that word on Amazon, you don't get military sci-fi. All right. So I didn't go with domination because of I didn't want to get locked into the erotica zone where the first 9 pages were, domination, something completely different. And we didn't even have to get to Seattle on that one. But check your titles. Check your titles and see what comes up. The best example is nothing, and that's not even really the best, because then where are people going to find your stuff? They want to see it when they're searching other stuff. You don't want to refine it so much that they have to search that specific word for you to pop up. You want to just pop up in general searches that then go with, like, I changed that title to Destroyer. You search Destroyer, now you get a lot of military sci-fi. You get some thrillers. But you get books that, hey, you might like this book if you search Destroyer. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I went with, as opposed to domination, which, we didn't go with that. It's do your research. So authors, it's the good cover artist, because Ryan has advised me as well and said, I'm not sure this title works for if this is what you're telling me your book is. So listen to your cover artist, because especially leaders in the industry like we have here, when they tell you that I may not be able to save you.
A cover won't save you. Back to the nonfiction real quick for especially the meat buying guide. You are answering a problem. Like, nonfiction is about solving a problem. Your title needs to convey that. And think of your title and how big it is on the cover is providing a solution for someone who has that problem. So think of what the problem is that you're solving, someone who doesn't know how to buy meat. And how does your title go, I'm going to help you solve that problem? That's the general of like self-development help guides with nonfiction, is you are solving a reader's problem. And if you think in those terms, that will help a lot. Is what is the problem you're solving, and does the reader see you as solving that problem? So your cover needs to convey trust with high quality, large title, so they can see it solves the problem in thumbnail. A title that actually conveys that. So back to what Craig was just saying with, like, make sure your title aligns with what you're doing and with the genre.
Yeah, I would say the that will for nonfiction is, I mean, there are different kinds of nonfiction, like, like a recipe book is very different from what we're talking about here. But I would say, that looks like it will help would be how I would answer that.
Exactly.
So, and the looks like it will help is sort of twofold, right? It's like being clear about what the problem is and how you will solve it, but also I believe communicating that you have the authority to solve it. And I think that authority 100%. Part of that question mark is especially important in self-published, because they don't have, they're not seeing this book in Barnes & Noble, and there is so much sort of quickly published stuff on Amazon in those nonfiction categories. So my intuition, and I haven't done a lot of nonfiction work, but my intuition is that your cover really needs to be extra communicative of the authority. And I assume lots of nonfiction people usually start by building whatever it is their brand is first, usually by a blog or by, usually when I feel like when people come to the nonfiction space for books, it is not their first stop. And so I think making sure that it is consistent with whatever brand you've already established. And if you haven't already established a brand, from what I understand, would really caution you to go make sure that you've got that machine and that brand nonfiction ready behind you, even if it's just a small blog or YouTube channel, before you go and publish the book. that's just my 2 cents.
And if I'm saying too much, then please, that's okay to highlight that. I'm always trying to speak better. I know when I listen to my own podcasts and stuff like that, I catch myself saying a lot. Hey, that's a verbal tick. Probably, but I do it. I do it too, and it's not my intention. Please understand it. This is positive feedback. It's all good. We're trying to convey information, and if that prevents us from conveying information, it's like using the same word repeatedly in your book. My first book, my first one I ever wrote, one of my proofreaders came back 3 months after I'd published it and said, "You say a couple a lot." And I did a search. I used couple 120 times in 140 pages, and a few like 130 times. So, okay. So the good news is the 50 people who bought that book in the first 3 months it was published, they were okay. Now, everybody else who bought it since got the better version. So we're always trying to improve, whether it's our books or covers. One of the things that I talked about with Ryan is the Z approach to the cover, how people read. They'll start at the top, go left to right, go angle across to the bottom, and then left to right across the bottom. And this is one thing we really focused on with the Monster Case Files covers, is getting that left to right across the top. We had some diagonal text, but it gave us that left to right diagonal and would impact exactly how a viewer, a reader, a potential buyer would look at those covers. So do you do anything with that in romance? So
actually I have a bit of a different approach. Anyone who's looking at my screen right now will notice there's a giant white blob behind me, and it's really annoying. Sorry about that, but this actually comes to my point. For me, the point that people look at the most is usually whatever's the brightest spot on the cover. Mm-hmm. So right now, anyone that's looking at me, all you can notice is that there is a giant white sun behind me, and you are not looking at my face.
Star Trek style.
But on a cover, that is often actually how I think about it. So I think about where is the brightest point on the cover. And I usually try to make that right actually here behind wherever the model's face is. Because for romance, oftentimes when I've got models, that is where I want people's eyes to go to first. Because in romance, it is oftentimes the model that is going to be selling that book. So I think, okay, I want them to look at the model first. And from there, usually I will use leading lines in the cover. So I oftentimes will have tree branches or railings or whatever pointing again to the model, and then from there down to the title. And then what I will do is I do think of it like I do think of that what is that Fibonacci sequence, right? That spiral, the third. So we'll start at the model's head, and then they'll work. It is a bit of a Z shape. They'll work their way down. Oftentimes for magic, I'll have magic coming from people's hands in that spiral. People will notice that on my covers, and that leads them to the title. So yeah.
Those are principles of design that some people intrinsically just get it, like they just start designing that way on their own, and those are the people you want to, as a designer, punch in the throat, because you're like, how did you learn this within 6 months of doing this? But for me, it's a science that you apply, and that hopefully if you do it right, people don't notice it. It's just pleasing, and you can almost tell sometimes when it's not done right. Go find a cover you don't like, and it may be that the diagonals go the wrong way. And maybe he's holding a sword and the sword's going the wrong way, or he's looking up to the top left. Well, your eye wants to go the other way, and you're following the direction he's looking, and then all of a sudden you don't know where to go, and then you just go to the title and you're like, and you move on, because it's not, and you don't know why, and it's subconscious. And as a designer, the hardest thing to do, and the hardest thing to deal with, especially when you're trying to help someone who's trying to do their own cover, you're like, well, let me give you some hints, trying to explain some of that stuff. It's like the depth of cover design gets into subconscious viewing of how your eye wants to pleasingly read something. It's almost impossible to get into that level of detail, just because it's something it's learned through time and I think the best analogy I ever heard for it was, for barbecue. And, if you ever make barbecue, you can't make good barbecue till you make bad barbecue. You know what I mean? And you can't make good covers till you've made bad covers. And once you made those bad covers, you can see what you did wrong. And when you apply the science of why, you immediately pops out. You're like, oh gosh, I see exactly why this is bad.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I would say that the eye flow is a big problem with amateur cover designers and do-it-yourself cover designers. Lack of contrast, exactly what Sylvia was just saying, not having a strong value range. And one thing you can look at your cover in black and white.
Yes.
That's how a lot of people are going to see it anyways on Kindles. Like, you need to look at it in black and white and see, are things popping? Or is it, and I made that huge mistake when I first started because I was using complementary colors a lot, which are opposites visually, orange and blue. But if you turned it to black and white, and if they were the same saturation, it was completely flat. So I needed to work more with my value education. That's a huge mistake that do-it-yourselfers and new designers make, is not looking at stuff in black and white. That will help you out so much. And then looking at your rules of thirds. And like in cozies, I literally use like generally 2/3 for the title. And I'm playing a lot with rules of thirds. Unlike you guys who are doing a lot more eye flow with the Z's and the S's and the circles, I don't have to do that so much with cozies. Sometimes I do. But most of the time I get to stay just with rules of third and be good with it.
Mariah, I'd say there's the one great thing that you taught me, which is this idea of always having people facing, like if people are turned, having them facing, I guess it is left. I'm ironically very bad
where you
directions.
open the book, where you
the way you open the book.
So,
and I often find that if something's like looking like wrong with a cover and I don't know what it is, it's usually because the person, all my elements and directional flow is turned to the left instead of the right.
Yep.
And then it's like subconscious because we read left to right. So like if you're finding yourself looking at a cover that you or designer did and you're not sure what's up, check to make sure that people are facing
flip it
way.
Flip it sometimes, and that will make a huge difference. If you flip it and you're like, oh, it's balanced now, and that speaks to the Z reading. Also subconsciously,
it sounds like we're speaking like Arabic right here. I'm
right? Subconsciously, even though most of us are dealing with ebooks, people visually want to end up at the bottom right hand to open the book. So the flow starts from the left top, exactly like Craig and Ryan were saying, and it's to end up at that bottom corner. So you open it and read it, or you flip it over and read the back. Like, this is, even though we're dealing with digital books, we still have that subconscious training of manual books in our hands, and our eyes move the same way.
We should be manipulating your eyes as cover designers. We were manipulative sons of bitches.
We 100%.
And
100%. You don't want to date me, but you want me to work on your cover.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And you think about the black and white and the bringing it down. Shrink your cover, get it really small. Put it in black and white. Take the top 100 before you publish. Take it all down, have your designer put your cover in there, and then flip it to black and white, or take a screenshot on your Kindle or whatever, so that you can see what it looks like at all the different ways that it's going to get bought, right? It's 100%. Flip it. I mean, if you were watching an illustrator, a really good illustrator, like Rebecca Haskell or Jeff Brown or Tom Edwards, watch them illustrate, or videos of them illustration. They'll be painting, and they'll flip the painting, and they'll flip it, and they'll flip it, and they'll flip it, because they're looking for making sure things are balanced and they're correct, and the same thing with your cover. It's okay to invert the text just to look, Yeah.
That's certain covers, you can limit the artwork, and one that comes to mind is Making Ducks Pay. This is an old book, and unfortunately, it's not about remunerations for the ducks' crimes against humanity. So that's something different. And the meat book. The meat book, you don't need any artwork. Just go with Dominate Your Meat. Put your name as the title, and then you're in. You've got it. You don't have to search. You can actually fire your cover artist and just go with typography, white on black. Dominate your meat, and publish that dude, and just rake the money in. Plan your vacation to Cabo. It's all good. And no, I don't need any credit on that. And actually, please don't give me any credit on that. getting your name right. I have over 100 and some titles. I think 150 if we include the short stories. My name has been consistently all caps, block letters, except for that one romance. Now I've got some stuff. But getting that consistent across all the covers, I have something like 9 or 10 different designers who have done my covers, and getting that consistent for my brand across the bottom. And now my thrillers are the first ones where my name's actually on the top. And then we redid some post-apoc where we put our names up at the top. But that consistent and that brand. What advice would you give authors for maintaining that consistency across different titles and different designers, or different genres and different designers?
Yeah, I'll start with this one because I deal with it a lot.
Yeah.
I find oftentimes the bigger an author is, the more important maintaining that brand becomes. With big name authors, sometimes they will come to me and they will send me a PNG of their author name formatted exactly the way that they would like to do. So I also do author branding packages. So oftentimes I like, whether that's creating like series logos or actually just creating how you want your author name to be formatted. So whether you work with me or with another designer, you have that PNG ready to send. And I will say that it's a balancing act. I found that I remember there was this one of my really good clients and authors. She redid a bunch of her book covers and redid them to make them more branded, and she saw a big increase of sales. But it is a double-edged sword, because anytime that your branding looks different, you are potentially going to reach audiences that have already not opened up your books for whatever reason. So this isn't to say that you should change that author name, but I would caution against having the exact same template for all of your books. Like, you know, I think that the...
Oh,
no. No. Oh, no. Sylvia unplugged.
She's in a big thought. You can tell.
And that's it. That's the secret to 1 million sales. You cut out, Sylvia, right at your key point. You cut out.
No,
yes.
I was gonna. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sorry. Hopefully, I'll repeat myself. I don't even know why that happened, but I will say that the secret is that you want to make sure that you're maintaining the brand, but also doing something new with every series, usually by the title, typography, or even like, you know, if, for example, if you're one book series you have is dragons and the next is like more, you know, wolf shifters, I would say that those series should look like, should have different color palettes. They should be something new, because you want to be getting new people each time into your flow. And if it always looks the same, people are just gonna be like, oh, I already know what this is and I didn't like it. If they didn't like, or I didn't try it, or it wasn't for me.
Right.
I think we use the color palettes to differentiate my stuff. Here's a post-apoc because it's red and orange. Here's sci-fi, space sci-fi because it's blue. And Ryan has done a good job helping me brand along those lines. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I don't know who the meat guy is, Facebook user, but I will buy you cover. If Ryan will do it, I will pay for it, and you can get your dominate your meat cover. I mean your title, not the title you should use. But if Ryan can get some time on his schedule, I'll pay for that, and we'll get you a cover, and hopefully it'll be what you want. So you guys get in touch later. Facebook user.
That's awesome. Thank you,
Chris. Thanks, Ryan. I figured because I thought you were looking for some work for September and October. And once you're up to speed, I mean, you had shoulder surgery, and it's you're recovering. I can't thank you guys enough. You guys are the all-star team when it comes to designing. It's not, and I know we were all going to meet in Vegas, and it was going to be a mega bash of designers. We had Amalia coming. We had Christian Bentalon. We had Tom Edwards. We had Jeff Brown. Oh my God! I mean, it was such an all-star team of. It was probably going to be the biggest collection of cover designers in the world to ever meet in one place. And I was so looking forward to that. I hope you guys can join us in Vegas in 2021. Mark that time off your calendar. We have, I leave tomorrow to go to Vegas to look at the facilities. And one thing that they have that when I signed the contract that I didn't realize was we have a conventions. We have a room that'll hold 2,000 people, and then some breakout rooms that'll hold 150, 250 people each. But then we also have the expo space, which will hold 2,000 people. We might be able to keep that active for the entire time of the show, like all 5 days. So We can have the cover artist over there, 1 or 2 at any point in time if you're not doing panels or sessions. But I will look specifically at that because this expo space, it's a massive space. So we can have a huge expo that runs along parallel with the show for the cover artists to really show their stuff, pimp their ride, and help people understand more on a personal level, if that's what you guys are willing to do. And also you guys get to hang out and watch each other work and learn something, because even if you're a Photoshop guru, you can always learn a little bit more. So we really appreciate what you guys do for us as indies and the industry, because I know some of the on my thriller titles, Stuart Batch did those, and he has about half of the titles in the top 100 that he did, and that's trad or indie. So that crossover for the artistry is really exceptional nowadays. My editor edited for Bain. I mean, so you look at what is the opportunities available to indie authors nowadays, and I have to parrot Mark Dawson when he says there's never been a better time to be an indie author, because of, look at you guys, look at what you've been able to do, look at the titles that have your covers on them that rock up into the top 100, and we say, hey, this is available if you're willing to have your shit together, to ask for the right things, listen, and then pay the money and get the cover, work into your schedule. So it helps that you don't write your book and then all of a sudden, hey, I need a cover by next week. You want it bad, you get bad. So you plan ahead, and you're gonna your title and your book will be much better because of it. So last words, Ryan.
I'm going to touch on what you just said. If you pour your heart and soul, and sometimes if it's your first book, a year of your life into this book, and you put, dominate your meat on the cover, you've got to invest that time. I mean, put $20 a month away for that year and go get something decent, or put $40 a month away for a year and get something fantastic. And just, it depends on the designer, but I mean, invest in the cover so that people will see the book. They will never read the blurb if they never click on the cover. The cover is what gets them to the blurb. The blurb is what sells the book. And make sure they're clicking on that cover.
Yeah. Mariah.
We're all kind of saying the same thing, and good designers will start saying all the same things. So kind of listen to that. Your book cover, a fishing analogy, it is bait for the audience. You use different bait for different types of fish. You want to, are we done?
No, that's good. It does that on occasion. It's fine.
Yeah, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, know your genre. Look at it in the marketplace. And this is a business, if you want it to be. If this is a hobby for you, it's a hobby, and you've been published, and that's awesome. But if you need to make this a business and pay for your life with this, you have to treat it like a business. You have to treat it like a product and start getting into that mindset. I'm selling a product to buyers. What do they want?
And you can still love your book. It's okay. You can you have to love your book. But it's your baby. Wrap a nice cover around your baby and put it out there and sell that thing. Realize the value of all that work you invested putting it together, and don't ask for it. And now all of a sudden, hey, oh shit, I'm going to publish my book and I don't have a cover. Well, like I said, if you want it bad, you get it bad. If you prepare, I get the covers before I start writing the book, and then I will put a scene in the book that matches the cover. So no matter what, because it's so much easier to do that than to try to describe, hey, here's exactly how I want that scene to go. I'll write it however it needs to be. I mean, just tell me. And Sylvia, final words.
Yeah, I would say think about the emotion that you want your book cover and your blurb and all of your marketing material to activate. When people get in trouble is when they get into like little. It really is all about making sure that your audience feels something, and usually what you want them to feel. So I'm emotion as a romance lady. I'm emotion first.
Yep. Trigger those emotions in the reader, and the emotions in the buyer. You want to trigger their buy emotion for the reader, so they one click. And this is on your blurb. I try to make that sale in the top 3 lines, so they don't have to click read more. If they read more, fine. They're not going to get a whole lot more from me because I'm trying to make that sale. I want a one-click sale off the cover. That's first those top lines that they can see before they click read more, and that is nirvana. Because then it's like, hey, move on. And I have a lot of books, and I try to sell them the next book in the current book. That marketing is free, baby. You put in the back matter. Hey, here's all my other stuff. Look at these cool covers. Look at this cool stuff that you can enjoy. So thank you guys for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank
you. You guys have a great day. Let me click stop here. Everybody, peace, fellow humans.
Hey, see ya.
Peace.
Bye.